Or a mark could mean 10 sheep, but it could not tell the story of what happened to them. The first real books, if we stretch the definition, were slabs of clay. Around 3200 BCE, in the land of Sumer, part of ancient Mesopotamia, scribes developed cuneiform writing. The process was simple, but ingenious. A reed stylus, cut to a triangular point, was pressed into soft clay, leaving wedge-shaped marks. When the clay dried, either in the sun or baked in a kiln, it became hard and permanent. These clay tablets were small, but heavy. And they were everywhere. Merchants used them to record trades. Priests used them to keep track of temple offerings. Kings used them to make laws. One famous example is the Code of Hammurabi, a set of laws written in stone, but thousands of smaller tablets survive with everyday records, debts owed, goods delivered, workers hired. Reading a cuneiform tablet today takes years of training. The writing is dense, and the Sumerians had hundreds of different signs. And yet, for over 2,000 years, this was the cutting-edge technology for recording information. Some Mesopotamian archives contained tens of thousands of tablets, stacked neatly like bricks. In other words, the world's first libraries looked more like warehouses. While the Mesopotamians were pressing words into clay, the Egyptians were slicing reeds. The papyrus plant grew thick along the banks of the Nile. By cutting its stalks into thin strips, soaking them, and pressing them together, the Egyptians created sheets that could be written on with ink. Papyrus was light, portable, and could be rolled into scrolls. This made it far more convenient than clay tablets. Egyptian scribes wrote in hieroglyphics for monumental inscriptions, but also used a faster script called
Papyrus Scrolls
for
could be
everyday
several
documents.
meters long.
The famous Book of the Dead was not a single book at all, but a collection of spells and instructions for the afterlife, often written on long papyrus rolls buried with the dead. Egypt also developed one of the earliest book industries. Scribes copied works for temples, for government use, and for wealthy individuals. However, papyrus was fragile. It didn't survive well in humid climates, which is why most surviving examples come from Egypt's dry deserts. While Egypt and Mesopotamia were developing their writing systems, China was doing the same, but on entirely different materials. Before the invention of paper, the Chinese wrote on bamboo strips. Each strip was about the width of a finger and could hold a few columns of characters. Strips were tied together with cords, forming a long, flexible sheet. The downside? Bamboo was heavy. A long book could be dozens of strips, bundled together, more like carrying a small fence than a modern paperback. For special works, the Chinese used silk. It was light, smooth, and beautiful to write on, but incredibly expensive. Silk manuscripts were reserved for the most important texts. One of the oldest known Chinese books is the I Ching, or Book of Changes, a manual of divination that is still read today. Chinese scholars also developed early book catalogs, organizing works by subject, philosophy, poetry, history. These traditions would eventually merge with another Chinese invention that would change the world, paper. But that is a story for later. By the time we reach the ancient Greeks, writing had already developed into an art and a business. The Greeks inherited the idea of the scroll from Egypt, but they expanded it into a
Greek
thriving
scroll,
literary
usually
culture.
made
Of papyrus, could be anywhere from a few feet to dozens of feet long. Reading one was not a casual activity. You had to hold it carefully, unrolling with one hand while rolling up the part you'd finished with the other. Greek literature was stored and studied in great centers of learning, the most famous being the Library of Alexandria. Legend tells us it contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls. The truth is harder to know, because the library was destroyed, not once, but possibly several times, and the details have faded into history. Scrolls were fragile, and copying them by hand was laborious. This meant that books, even in Greece's intellectual golden age, were rare and expensive. When the Romans rose to power, they continued the scroll tradition. In Rome, books became a symbol of education and prestige. Wealthy citizens often kept libraries in their homes, not because they read constantly, but because owning scrolls looked impressive. Roman bookshops existed, but mass production still meant a team of scribes copying by hand, one scroll at a time. Around the 1st century CE, something remarkable began to appear: the codex. Instead of a long roll, the codex was made of stacked pages, bound along one edge. It could be opened flat, written on both sides, and read from any page instantly, no rewinding necessary. The codex format may have originated with the Romans, possibly adapted from wax writing tablets used for note-taking. Early Christians adopted the codex eagerly, finding it practical for carrying their scriptures. The advantages were obvious. Codices could hold more text, last longer, and be stored more efficiently. You could even write different works in the same volume, something nearly impossible with scrolls. The transition was slow. Old habits are hard to break, and many scholars continued to use scrolls for centuries. By the Middle Ages, however, the codex had completely replaced the scroll in most of the world. The fall of the Roman Empire didn't end the book, but it did change where books were made. In medieval Europe, most books were produced in monasteries. Inside the scriptorium, a room dedicated to copying manuscripts, monks worked for hours in silence. They sat at sloped wooden desks, using quills and ink made from oak galls. The process was painstaking. First, parchment had to be prepared, scraped, stretched, and smooth animal skin. Then, lines were ruled with a stylus to keep the writing straight. Some manuscripts were purely text, but others were illuminated, decorated with gold leaf, intricate borders, and colorful illustrations. A single illuminated Bible might take years to complete. Books were so valuable that they were often chained to library shelves to prevent theft. In some monasteries, the penalty for stealing a book was excommunication. While Europe's book production remained slow, the Islamic world experienced a flourishing of literature. After the Islamic conquests of the 7th and 8th centuries, scholars in cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba collected and translated works from Greece, Persia, India, and beyond. The introduction of paper from China in the 8th century transformed bookmaking in the Islamic world. Paper was cheaper than parchment and easier to produce in large quantities. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad became a famous center for learning, where scholars copied and studied thousands of texts. Book markets flourished. In some cities, you could find shops selling everything from poetry to medical treatises. The calligraphy of Arabic manuscripts was considered an art form in itself, with elaborate scripts and decorative borders. This period preserved and expanded much of the world's knowledge that would later return to Europe during the Renaissance. Long before Gutenberg, printing was already being practiced in East Asia. By the Tang dynasty in China, 7th to 10th centuries, woodblock printing was common. A block of wood would be carved with the text in reverse, inked, and pressed onto paper. In the 11th century, Chinese inventor Bai Xing created movable type using baked clay. Each character could be rearranged to print different texts. While ingenious, the thousands of characters in Chinese writing made the system cumbersome. In Korea, by the 13th century, printers were using movable metal type, centuries before Europe. The oldest surviving book printed with metal type is the Jikji, produced in 1377, nearly 80 years before Gutenberg's Bible. Despite these innovations, East Asian printing didn't spark the same kind of social revolution it later would in Europe, partly because handwritten manuscripts were already widespread and culturally valued. By the mid-15th century, Europe was on the brink of a quiet revolution. Johannes Gutenberg, a goldsmith and inventor from Mainz, Germany, developed a practical system for movable metal type. Before this, books were copied by hand, one page at a time. The process was slow, expensive, and prone to error. Gutenberg's press allowed for identical copies of a text to be produced much more quickly, days instead of months. The first major work printed using this method was the Gutenberg Bible, around 1455. It was a beautiful book, carefully set in type, printed on fine paper, and often hand-finished with illuminations. Printing spread rapidly across Europe. By 1500, hundreds of printing shops existed, producing millions of books. For the first time, information could travel widely. Yet the revolution was slow to affect relatively cheaply. Rural villages might never see a printed book. The press primarily benefited scholars, clergy, and the growing urban elite. With the explosion of printed material came new challenges. Books were no longer rare treasures, but commodities. Merchants and publishers had to find buyers. Book fairs became popular in major cities, such as Frankfurt and Venice. Printers advertised their works and competed for attention. At the same time, authorities worried about the spread of ideas. The church issued indexes of forbidden books. Kings and governments controlled what could be printed. Yet, despite censorship, ideas circulated. Underground printing and smuggling of books became a common phenomenon. The balance between accessibility and control shaped the cultural history of Europe for centuries. When Europeans settled in the New World, they brought books with them, but not many. Early colonial libraries were small and focused on religious texts. The first printing press in America was set up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in 1638. Benjamin Franklin, a printer, author, and statesman, later became a key figure in American publishing. He emphasized the importance of accessible knowledge, founding libraries, and printing affordable texts. Over the next 2 centuries, printing grew steadily. Newspapers, almanacs, and textbooks became widespread. Books became symbols of education, democracy, and civic engagement. Even in remote areas, owning a few books indicated a family's dedication to learning. The 19th century brought mechanization to the world of books. Steam-powered presses replaced hand-operated ones. Machine-made paper replaced handmade sheets. The linotype machine, invented in the late 1800s, allowed printers to set entire lines of text at once, dramatically increasing speed. Books could now be produced in massive quantities, and prices dropped. This era saw the rise of dime novels, inexpensive, popular fiction sold to the growing literate public. Educational publishing expanded rapidly. Textbooks, encyclopedias, and reference books became staples in homes and schools. Books were no longer luxuries. They were tools, instruments of learning and entertainment. Not all books were meant for general readers. Atlases, maps, and scientific treatises required specialized knowledge and careful printing. Illustrated books, especially for children, became increasingly common in the 19th century. Books for collectors, limited editions, and fine bindings created a niche market for connoisseurs. Libraries, both public and private, grew. By the end of the 19th century, reading had become a widespread habit, forming the foundation for modern book culture. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, books had become much more accessible. Public libraries emerged as institutions dedicated to providing free access to knowledge. Andrew Carnegie, a Scottish-American industrialist, played a key role in this movement. He funded the construction of over 2,500 libraries worldwide, believing that access to books could empower individuals. Libraries were more than just collections of books. They were spaces for learning, discussion, and community. They democratized knowledge, allowing people of modest means to explore literature, science, and history. In the 20th century, the invention of the paperback revolutionized reading. Paperbacks were small, portable, and affordable. No longer did readers need to invest in expensive hardcovers. Now books could be bought at newsstands, drugstores, and airports. This led to the rise of mass-market fiction, thrillers, romances, science fiction genres that reached millions of readers. Book clubs, such as the Book of the Month Club, further popularized reading in homes across everyday life. Commuters, students, and vacationers could carry entire libraries in their hands. Academic publishing grew in importance, producing textbooks, journals, and encyclopedias. The encyclopedias of the 18th and 19th centuries, such as the Encyclopedia Britannica, compiled the world's knowledge into organized volumes. Universities expanded their libraries, supporting research and learning. Scholarly books, though not as widely read as novels, shaped education, science, and policy. Reference works allowed readers to access specialized knowledge quickly, helping democratize expertise. The late 20th and early 21st centuries brought the digital revolution. Electronic books, or e-books, allowed entire libraries to fit on a single device. The Amazon Kindle, launched in 2007, popularized reading on screens, making books instantly downloadable. Audiobooks also grew in popularity, providing a new way to consume literature. Digital formats promised convenience, portability, and accessibility. However, traditional print remains popular. Many readers still enjoy the tactile experience of holding a book, turning pages, and even smelling the paper. The coexistence of print and digital formats shows that the essence of a book, the transmission of ideas, transcends its medium. What does the future hold for books? Artificial intelligence may one day generate entire novels, textbooks, or personalized learning materials tailored for individual readers. Virtual reality and immersive media could allow readers not just to read stories, but to step inside them, exploring worlds in 3 dimensions. Interactive books may combine text, sound, animation, and even haptic feedback, creating experiences that merge reading with gaming or virtual exploration. Yet, despite all these technological advances, the core principle remains unchanged. Books are a way to transmit ideas, knowledge, and imagination across time and space. Even as formats change, the desire to record, share, and read will endure. Future generations may look back at our books the way we look back at clay tablets, scrolls, and manuscripts, marveling at the care and effort it took to preserve knowledge for posterity. In every era, the book has adapted. From stone to papyrus, from scrolls to codices, from printing presses to ebooks, it has persisted because humans want to remember and communicate, from spoken stories around ancient campfires to glowing screens in our modern hands. The book has traveled thousands of years of human history. It has survived stone, clay, papyrus, parchment, bamboo, silk, ink, metal, steam, and now bites. It has empowered civilizations, preserved cultures, and connected minds across generations. The book is more than paper, pixels, or even words. It is memory. It is imagination. It is thought. And while its form may continue to change, its purpose remains the same, to hold and share human knowledge. So the next time you pick up a book, consider the long, slow journey it represents, a journey spanning millennia, continents, and countless hands. Every book you read is part of a story that is far bigger than the story printed on its pages. And that is the boring, fascinating, and enduring history of the book. While most books are meant to communicate information, some are celebrated as art objects. From elaborately illuminated medieval manuscripts to beautifully bound modern editions, books can be admired for their craftsmanship. In Europe, private collectors commissioned special editions with intricate covers, gilded pages, and hand-painted illustrations. In Japan, the Ehon tradition produced woodblock printed picture books with exquisite attention to color and detail. Even in the 20th century, artists like M.C. Escher and Salvador Dali experimented with books as visual art. Books can therefore be appreciated not just for what they say, but for how they look, feel, and exist in space. Books have always reflected and shaped society. In revolutionary times, books spread ideas that changed politics, science, and religion. From Martin Luther's pamphlets in 16th century Europe to Thomas Paine's Common Sense in America, printed words could inspire action. Yet, books could also reinforce social hierarchies. For centuries, literacy was a privilege of the elite. Owning a library often indicated wealth and education. Public education and libraries gradually democratized knowledge, giving ordinary people the power to read, learn, and question authority. Even today, books play a role in shaping culture, from best-selling novels to online self-publishing platforms. The book is not merely a passive object, it is an active agent in human society. After thousands of years, the book continues to endure even in the digital age. Physical books, ebooks, audiobooks, each format serves a different need, but all continue to preserve human thought. Libraries, universities, and personal collections ensure that knowledge is transmitted across generations. Some books may fade into obscurity, while others become cultural touchstones. The history of the book teaches us patience, care, and the value of memory. It reminds us that ideas are more powerful than the medium they inhabit, and that humans have always sought to record, preserve, and share their stories. Books for children have a unique history. From early moral tales in Europe to picture books in Japan, children's literature was designed to teach, entertain, and shape young minds. Illustrated editions, like those by Beatrix Potter or Dr. Seuss, combined art and storytelling in ways adults could appreciate too. Children's books helped instill literacy habits, imagination, and cultural values, creating generations of lifelong readers. Books documenting travel and exploration allowed people to experience distant lands without leaving home. Explorers like Marco Polo and Captain Cook inspired wonder through detailed accounts of geography, culture, and adventure. These books also served practical purposes, providing maps, navigational tips, and scientific observations. Before photography and video, books were the primary way to see the world beyond one's town or country. Scientific progress depends heavily on books. From early alchemical manuscripts to Newton's Principia, books allowed discoveries to be recorded, shared, and verified. Medical treatises, engineering manuals, and mathematical works have shaped civilizations, guiding progress across centuries. Even today, textbooks and research publications remain essential for transmitting complex knowledge to students and scholars. Libraries have preserved human knowledge for millennia. From the Library of Alexandria to the Bodleian Library in Oxford, these institutions store culture, history, and ideas. Modern public and digital libraries make books accessible globally, breaking down barriers of distance and wealth. Libraries are living monuments to humanity's commitment to memory, learning, and discovery. The 21st century has seen an explosion of digital books, audiobooks, and online archives. Ebooks allow instant access to millions of texts, and audiobooks make literature accessible during commuting, exercise, or multitasking. Digital platforms have also democratized publishing, giving anyone the opportunity to become an author. Despite the convenience of technology, the love of holding a book, turning pages, and reading slowly remains cherished by millions.